Damn, son, where'd you find this?
People don't be offended by the truth. They be offended because you called out the truth. Simple as that. They don't want to hear any other narrative that makes them look bad.
One thing I can't stand at this big grown age is somebody who act like cause and effect does not exist. Like, yes, your actions caused this outcome. Yes, what you did lit the match. Like, why are you surprised and playing victim?
Guys, Chico, they never lied.
That's how you know somebody doesn't respect you. They listen to reply, not to be understood. They cut you off. They minimize what actually matters to you. They laugh at your boundaries, and then they call you sensitive when you try to hold the line. They show up late, they cancel last minute, forget the things you've told them, because in their world, your time, your energy, even your voice aren't a priority. They're just an option. You see, there are two kinds of people. Those who adjust when they realize they've actually hurt you, and those who expect you to adjust so they don't have to change. You don't need to be disrespected loudly to be disrespected deeply. Sometimes you'll see it. It's just in their tone, in their patterns, in the silence after you're known. Respect isn't what they say when they're watching. It's how they act when they think you'll tolerate it.
By examining his own attitude towards the possibilities of peace, towards the Soviet Union, towards the course of the Cold War.
Art muscle. It was a way of making me feel that they were a part of me.
You see it on the bridge. Wait, how they get it? If the government had to change the screw in the bridge, they had to shut it down. They got state troopers out there. They got lanes closed. They got their strange machines. How did they get up there?
All boys, well, happy Wednesday. Snow is starting to melt. Hopefully you ain't get stuck in it. You know, I'm glad to be here with you guys. I got Sydney in here. I'm curious. I'm really curious to hear how this one is gonna go. I'm gonna bring her up here in a second. I just want to give a shout out to my poets, writers, content creators, to the people who have been supporting and showing love to the channel. Appreciate y'all. All right, let me bring her up to the big screen. Do me a solid, make sure y'all support her, show her some love. Matter of fact, we finally got this right. I can put that up there. That's what you need to get in contact with her. All right, just wave the magic wand and you good. What up? What up?
Hello, one sec. My computer has a super annoying thing. I don't remember, feature where if you swipe the mouse pad, it closes all of your tabs. And I'm like, I don't know how to turn it off. And it's super annoying because I'll like swipe from one page because I have two pages open, and I'll swipe from one to the next and it'll close all of them. Like it won't close out, it'll just minimize all of them. But I'm like, please, where do I turn this off? This is so annoying.
Yeah. I don't know specifically. All I can say is somewhere in settings. It's got to be somewhere in settings. Yeah.
It's not it's always like counterintuitive. It's never in the spot that you think it would be.
Right.
But
right.
I'll figure it out eventually.
Look.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you got it.
Well, I just wanted to say I chose this topic because yesterday was Holocaust Remembrance Day. And also, given what's happening in the country, obviously not nearly as bad as what happened in that time period. It still is reminiscent of some of what the German people and others had to deal with. So I thought it would be appropriate and respectful also to cover what happened during that time period. So that's why I chose this topic. I know it's a lot darker than my usual selections, but I have an interest in history, and I feel like it's important to talk about something as tragic as what happened.
And that's what I'm here for. That's what I'm here for, that history lesson, you know. So I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna give you the floor, I'm gonna let you cook, and I'll be here in the background listening.
All right. Yeah, so as I was saying, yesterday was Holocaust Remembrance Day. The Holocaust was a very, very dark time in history, and it's as hard as it is to hear the types of things that we'll be discussing in this. Granted, I won't be going like into explicit detail about like the stuff that people went through, but I will talk about what people went through, if that makes sense. I'm definitely not going to get into like gory details or anything, because number one, that's disrespectful, but also for any viewers that are uncomfortable with that type of stuff. But it was a very horrific time period, and it affected a lot of people. Over 6 million people were murdered during this time period. And as books history has shown us, if you don't learn your history, history will repeat itself, because we need the lessons from our past to understand how to proceed into the future. So that's another reason why I thought it would be important to discuss this. And as I said, I've noticed parallels between our current situation in the United States and the rise of the infamous man that we will be discussing. So I also felt it would be important to talk about this and point out some of those parallels, just to kind of bring the importance of paying attention to what's happening now into the forefront of people's minds, especially with how it's been escalating lately. So I'm first going to start with a brief history into how and why he came to power in the first place. There was a lot going on in the background. He, as we probably would guess, people don't just appear out of a vacuum. Things will precipitate. Horrid leaders rise to power. We've definitely had a history of extremely terrible leaders, and they don't just appear out of nowhere and get elected. There is a buildup that allows people like that to come into power. Typically, dictatorships, authoritarianism, other forms of absolute power come from strife and very difficult situations within a country, or multiple countries. During this time period that we'll be talking about, there were multiple countries that also experienced similar things, definitely not to the extent that Germany and the surrounding countries experienced, but Italy, Spain, I forgot what the other ones were. There's a couple that also ended up attracting dictators into power. So Hitler was definitely not the only one, but it was a time period of increased authoritarianism and ruthless takeovers of various governments throughout Europe. So again, he did not just suddenly appear. There was a buildup to get to the point, to get to that severity. And it started actually in 1920s. Technically, I guess you could even say it goes back as far as World War One, because in World War One, Germany was bankrupted. They owed other countries an exceptional amount of money that they had to pay back. I believe their debt was, in 1918, their debt was 156 billion marks. Let's see, which is... Let's see what the conversion is. Why didn't we convert it? Really? Okay. Well, I'm just gonna go. It's not converting, and I don't want to mess with that too much. It was a lot of money. A lot of money back then, and it caused hyperinflation within Germany at the time. Hyperinflation is basically when you have a combination of inflation of goods and deflation of money. So the money was not as worth it, and it couldn't go as far. This was partially because, as I said, their debt skyrocketed, and as a result, they money printed. And when you money print, quick economic lesson, you devalue the dollar because now you have way more, so they're not worth as much. If you think about it in modern terms, for example, if everyone has Labubus, they're not worth very much because everyone has them, so they're not very rare. But if you have like limited edition sneakers, where they only make 100, they're going to be worth a lot because not many people are going to have access to them, so the price only goes up. So what they did with money printing is they added a whole rush of dollars, or in their case marks, into their system, and that dramatically reduced the buying power of those dollars, to the point that at the peak of their their version of the Great Depression, people were actually burning stacks of cash because it was worth less than the firewood that they could have bought with the marks. It was also rapidly changing, to the point that if you went to the market, like people would go to the market as early as they could in the morning because they knew by the end of the day they might not be able to afford the food that they were trying to buy. And like the hyperinflation was insane. It was like food items could be thousands of marks, and possibly more. So people were not able to afford any of the necessities that they needed, and it put a lot of people into very dramatic, very quick poverty. One comparison is that in 1922, the mark, it was 320 marks per dollar. That was around like June. By December, it was 7,400 marks per dollar. And then by November 2023, $1 US was worth, let's see, 4,210,500,000,000 500 million marks. So gives you an idea of just how bad the inflation on their marks were. So if you can imagine what you might buy for $1 in that time period, imagine it now costing you 4 trillion of them to buy a potato or an apple or something. So that screwed over the American people royally. And so this sowed a lot of unhappiness in the country, and it was kind of doubled down by the fact that in the, I think it was in 1914, they had suspended the gold standard, so they couldn't convert currency into gold, and so that also limited what people were able to do with their money. So people were starving. They did not have, like, a lot of them were living on the streets. It had very severe repercussions on the German people at the time. So this sowed a lot of the discontent that fueled the rise of Nazism and anti-Semitism and other isms that blossomed during that time period. It caused Germans to start seeking other rulers, recognizing that the people that were in power at the time were not effective leaders for them. Only in 1918, they had only just chased out their monarch, so they still were struggling to establish governance in the country. So with all of this happening, shortages of food, fuel, clothing, supplies, prices rising, so even if you could get stuff, you wouldn't be able to afford it. People really started to struggle. 1923, in the middle of the worst part of their version of the Great Depression, Hitler basically was becoming popular. In 1919, he had joined the German Workers' Party and quickly became a very popular speaker. He was a skilled artist and writer, and he had a way of capturing people's attention and encouraging exuberance out of people. Give me one second. What do you need? What do you need?
Cat.
The cat? This one? Okay. And so within the Workers' Party, which later became known as the Nazi Party, he became their party leader by 1921, and then he became their party leader, but I will say that he did it under threat, where he basically said, elect me or I'm leaving. And so he ended up taking control over the party and ruled that party unchallenged. They ended up, he ended up staging a coup in Bavaria, which is, I think, part of Germany now. Let's see. I don't know if it's actually part of Germany.
Okay, Mom.
Yeah, Bavaria is a section. Let's see. North? No. West, east. What am I don't know my directions that well. Southeast Germany, the bottom section of Germany. So he staged a coup in Bavaria, and he was not successful. He ended up getting arrested during that time. His coup is now called the Beer House Putsch, German, Putsch. He was put on trial and was sentenced to 5 years of fortress confinement. So basically, he was sent to a castle-like structure. And even though he was sentenced to 5 years, he only served 9 of those months. And this was, to me, the turning point, because it's when he wrote his infamous book. The Mein Kampf became the handbook for Nazism. It spouted a lot of his anti-communist, anti-Semitist, ultranationalist views. He included a lot of criticism towards the Democratic Party, as well as the Treaty of Versailles, which is what saddled Germany with all of that debt after the World War I was concluded. And he also kind of talked about himself, and that was kind of like his introduction to the world. It basically became a national bestseller towards, I think it was the late 20s, that it was really picking up in in success. But he excuse me. So he wrote this book, and it became wildly successful. He originally wrote it to pay off what he owed because of his political decision. I mean, his coup. But it fueled a lot of the ideology that proliferated within his party. By 1932, he ran for president. He was defeated originally, but he was a very strong second. As I said, people in this time period were very, very unhappy with what was happening. The economy had begun to kind of recover by this time period, but the political landscape was very, very different, and it was affected by the 1929 Great Depression, the one that we associate with America. The Great Depression was not just an American depression. It did affect a bunch of other countries. I mean, it really affected the whole world. But it kind of like doubled down and further polarized German politics. Kind of like what we're seeing today, where people are splitting into two sides. You're either for or against. So that was what was happening within the public at the time. And because of that, his ideology, his dissent of the government was becoming very popular. It was reflecting what a lot of people were already feeling. And so by 1932, summer of 1932, the Nazi Party became the largest political party in Germany. I will say, I keep saying Germany because we're all familiar with Germany, but at the time it was called the Weimar Republic. So it technically was not named Germany at the time, but for this, I'm just going to say Germany because I don't want to keep saying Weimar Republic. But just to clarify. Anyway, they they were the largest party. They were not a majority party. So not everybody followed that belief system, but it was exceptionally popular. So by 1933, Hitler was appointed as the new chancellor, which I believe, what did they do? I think they kind of make decisions, or kind of like a spokesperson. They are chancellors are courts of justice, judge and council. Their duties include directing government operations, coordinating the cabinet, and depending on the country, they are potentially only removable through a consecutive vote. I'm not really exactly sure what that would mean in Germany at the time, but he had some significant decision-making abilities in that position. So at this point, he had a significant role within. You want to wave? You want to wave? Here. You want to wave?
Wave.
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 All right. Here, go on out. You're very distracting. You want to go downstairs? Daddy's here. Okay. We'll run away. 3-year-olds or 2-year-olds. She's almost 3, not there yet. So, yeah. In 1933, he is really when he started to kind of gain his power. I think that's when he got elected. Let me find the. I have a lot of tabs open because there's a lot to remember. So yeah, he was. Okay, so in February 1933, there was what was called the Reichstag fire, which I believe is when they set fire to German's parliament. It was an arson attack. It was 4 weeks after he was sworn in as chancellor. And it was supposedly blamed on a group of communist agitators. They claimed that the Hitler and his people basically claimed that the communists were plotting against the German government, which induced the president at the time, President Paul Hindenburg, to suspend civil liberties and pursue ruthless confrontation. So, arguably, when I've read this, it makes me think about what's happening right now in Minnesota and some other places. And it escalated a lot of the tensions that existed in the country. The fire basically engulfed the entire building, destroyed it. It resulted in arrests of multiple individuals that were associated with communism. And it kind of pushed him a little bit more into the spotlight at the time. So let's see. Where am I going to go from here? Okay, so by a month later, they. One second. Go downstairs. My bad, guys. By March of 1933, the law basically gave Hitler his dictator powers. It allowed his cabinet to enact law without parliamentary consent. Parliament is their version of Congress, I believe. And they're the ones that have to approve the decisions that are made by the president. And so it basically ended democracy in Germany. As this happened, it basically enabled them to start acting in the way that we know they did. They basically started to establish their brutal police force. They banned and dissolved trade unions, so that means workers no longer had ways to represent themselves, and they were all at the whim of the employers. They banned any other political parties, and they very, very heavily ratcheted up their hate rhetoric. I know a lot of people obviously know that the Jewish were heavily targeted. However, it was not just Jewish community members that were targeted. Black individuals were targeted. Civilians that were accused of disobedience, resistance, or partisan activity, basically if they followed a different political party. If you're gay, bisexual, or participated in what was seen as homosexual behavior, you would also be targeted. Jehovah's Witnesses, anybody with disabilities or who's seen as a drain on society, Polish individuals, political opponents, anybody dissenting the rise of the Nazis, Roma, which are known by the derogatory term gypsies, and other similar grouped in people. So any social outsiders that were considered like asocial. This would include people with like mental disabilities or mental differences, professional criminals, and then Soviet prisoners of war. So there, while it was largely the Jewish individuals that were targeted, they weren't the only people, for sure. And the attacks came in a bunch of different ways. One, there was an exceptional amount of propaganda that was coming out promoting racist, anti-Semitic, ultranationalist ideologies. They shamed and devalued people in public. They would put out like early advertisements about what it means to be a good German and showing what the perfect German family looks like. He also started to affect the school systems by moderating what was allowed to be taught taught to students. And he started programs like the Nazi, I think it was called the Nazi Youth Program, where they would train young Germans to adopt this ideology from a young age. I think they started at like 7 or 8, and then they had a different program for teenagers, young adults to basically guide people to adopt this type of hatred. They began to with time, they rapidly increased the amount of violence they displayed against people that were within all of these different groups. It started off with arrests, just public assassinations. They would shoot people on the streets, and obviously, I will get to that, but they ended up escalating towards the final solution. But at the beginning, it was a lot more rhetoric and basically trying to infiltrate the minds of people that were living then to encourage them to accept this ideology and embrace that type of hatred. They let's see. There's one thing here. Okay, so by 1930, by the 1930 federal election, Nazis became the second largest party in Germany, and basically became the dominant force. There was something else. Where was it? Brady's at that part. My bad. I opened a lot of tabs, so it's hard for me to keep track of where I'm at. I think I already covered that. Here we go. Okay. Where's the beginning? I have a page on what it was like in the beginning, because the Holocaust itself was towards the end time period, towards the 40s. But I want to talk about the ratcheting up, how they really put in these policies. Okay. There we go. So they did a number of things. As I said, they put out a bunch of propaganda. They put out posters. One of their big things was promoting ultranationalism, getting people to be as patriotic as possible, encouraging people to do for Germany what would help Germany. And then, as I said, villainizing the all of the groups of people that they did not like. They would start filming attacks on on ethnic groups, particularly individual towns. They used snipers to take people out, and then also would send troops into various parts of Germany. They also heavily influenced the press, preventing things from coming out, also telling them how to say things. They specifically instructed them to not use the word war because they didn't want to upset people, trigger people, make people rise up against what they were doing. They also started to change laws of what crimes were defined as. Even showing support for a group of people could be considered a crime. One of the things that they really latched onto, at least for Jewish individuals, is the fact that a lot of Jewish individuals, a high percentage of them, were on the higher echelon of society. They were far wealthier than a lot of German citizens. And so they blamed them for the economic damage that Germany had gone through. And they, so they started to then advance on other countries as well, to further their ideology, take it to other parts of the country. I mean, of the continent. We're gonna get to some of the sad parts. So, they had a goal of basically spreading their ideology across the entire country. And so once they had felt that they sufficiently indoctrinated their country, they wanted to basically take that outside of Germany. They ironically did a lot of good for Germany under the guise of like making Germany a better place. They built they built new roads, hospitals, stuff like that. They also lied a lot about what they did. They said that they were, for example, there was a 1941 booklet that reported that, they're bringing Jews to come work, and they're building new buildings, and they're setting up soup kitchens, and they're setting them up with like vocational training and teaching them how to write books and newspapers and stuff like that. And so while they talked a lot about these groups of people and how terrible they were, they also made it seem like the people that they were starting to remove from their homes or kill were being treated for the better. I'm trying to figure out how to explain the transition. If I keep pausing, I'm just trying to process how I want to say a lot of these things, because there's a lot I want to include. There's just a lot. Okay. So in 1933, this is when he came to power. German Jews made up less than 1% of the country's population. As I said, they were wealthier than average. And because they were the largest target, in the early 30s, over 1,500 anti-Jewish laws were enacted. They were banned and restricted from certain professions, civil service. They were basically harassed out of public life by the end of 1934. So they did not feel safe being in public. By 1935, they passed the Nuremberg laws, which effectively prohibited marriages and any sort of interactions between Jewish individuals and Germans. It barred Jewish households from employing German women under the age of 45, and it reduced citizens that had Jewish blood from having their full rights. By November of 1935, they extended a lot of these laws to, I'm quoting this is not how I think, gypsies, Negroes, and their bastards. Again, that is a direct quote. I'm not saying that. They began classifying all of them as enemies of the race-based state, because that was their dream, is a white, pure Germany. By 1930, and also in 1933, they boycotted Jewish businesses, excluded Jews from public service. This is also when the book burnings began, where they would ruin, destroy Jewish works of art and books, magazines, banned them from putting out newspapers, banned them from putting out magazines. And as I said, all through this time, they were experiencing ever increasing amounts of harassment, violence, and the loss of rights. Yes, I do know that's a good book. It's Fahrenheit 451, unless there is another one by that name. But yeah, Fahrenheit 451, for anyone that doesn't know, is a book that talks about that situation, book burning, where all sorts of books were burned, and it was against the law to read those books. This is very common with more modern dictatorships, where they ban books and other rhetoric to not allow the dissemination of certain ideologies. Side note, this is something that's not to that degree happening in the United States. We obviously aren't like burning books yet, but there have been widespread removals of certain books from libraries, bookstores, in particular regions of the country, as well as within schools. So we are seeing mild versions of some of what Germany experienced in this time period. By 1938, people who were convicted of violating marriage laws began to be arrested, and proportions of these people were beginning to be sent to the concentration camps. I want to clarify too. Concentration camps were the camps that they sent people in. They're named as such because it's a concentrated amount of people there. They're not the same thing as the death camps. Death camps like Auschwitz, even though Auschwitz was both a death camp and a concentration camp. Concentration camps were more often work camps, where they were forced to do hard labor, and they basically just lived in slum conditions, incredibly poor conditions, frequently had lice and skin problems, were not fed appropriately. They had their head shaved. They were forced to wear clothing that people that had died before them had to wear. So that's partially why lice was a huge thing. They were living in really uncomfortable barracks. A lot of them didn't have blankets, pillows, separated from their families. Concentration camps were where they stayed. Death camps is where they were enacting the final solution, which I'll discuss in a little bit. They, as I said, they were banned from taking positions, certain jobs. They also started to be exposed or be subjected to extreme taxes. There was one tax that seized up to 90% of their assets. Their gold was stolen, their valuables were stolen. One particular event that still to this day is a what do you call it? All the words that I can think of are positive. It's not like momentous or anything. It's a very infamous night, very famous, Kristallnacht, and that was between November 9th and 10th in 1938. Nazi German leaders basically nationwide did an anti-Jewish riot where they said that it was the German people, but it was actually the German leaders. But they basically went in and they destroyed businesses. They vandalized thousands of their shops, broke into people's apartments and homes, desecrated religious objects, humiliated, assaulted, and killed Jewish individuals. They burned 1,400 synagogues, and they came in and imprisoned 26,000 Jewish men in concentration camps just for being Jewish. This was arguably, at least from what I've seen in historian discussions, was seen as kind of the turning point where they really, really switched from more political type violence to actual physical violence. They were doing it before, but after that, it really increased. So around this time, Germany had also started to invade other countries as well. And during this time period, this is when they started to widespread imprison Jewish individuals and others in ghettos. A lot of people that ended up there ended up starving to death, getting diseases and passing away, or being exposed to horrific treatment. Besides the imprisonment, they were also subjected to incredibly inhumane medical experiments. A lot of them were forcefully sterilized. A lot of the people that were experimented on they had like live surgeries done on them. They were infected with diseases and not given any treatment so they could watch the progression of the disease. They experimented with like chemicals and like different types of biological and non-biological things on them. Mengele was the most famous of which. He was literally called like the angel of death or doctor of death or something like that. I won't even get into that because it is horrific what some of these people were subjected to. But if you are curious, there's definitely a lot of information out there. I just think I don't want to talk about that because it's quite horrific, and a lot of people might not want to hear that. But they did do that. That took place in the 1930s and into the 40s. And they also, as I said, just straight up would murder people when they came in. If they were seen as unable to work, particularly women, children, the elderly, besides those other people that were in the groups they were attacking, they would have been killed. If you are seen as useful and able to work, you would be spared. But as soon as you were seen as useless, you would be killed. You also would be killed if you obviously revolted or showed any sort of like, I'm not going to put up with this. Those people were also killed. They did actually employ some of these individuals to do some of their dirty work. There was one woman that was famous for blanking on I forgot what she was responsible for. They did a movie, Ilse Koch. She basically was I think it was her. I think she was the one that turned in, like she was responsible for is it her? I don't remember what her name was. I remember seeing a documentary about her recently-ish. I don't want to waste the rest of my time trying to figure it out. But there was a woman that was a Jewish individual who was basically tasked with rooting out all the German or Jewish individuals that she could find. And so she's very widely hated because of her role in capturing so many Jewish people. And I think she tried to say she was doing it out of like, she was trying to save her family. I think that's what they were holding over her. Like they're saying like, we'll protect your dad and mom and brother or something if you do this. But they died anyways. I think they were killed. So, but yeah, she was responsible for killing a lot of Jewish individuals, and she was Jewish herself. This was not unheard of. There were a number of Jewish individuals that were employed by the Nazis that acted on their behalf and did various different things. A lot of them under the threat of violence, with the promise of protection and protecting their families. But obviously, these individuals were very reviled by their fellow community members for doing what they did. But it wasn't, as I said, it was not just the soldiers that were doing stuff. It was also employed Jewish individuals or others who got involved to protect themselves, to save themselves. Also, I will say there were German soldiers that did not approve of what was happening, and they stepped in to help release individuals. So not every single one of them was bad. Some of them were just following orders, and they did try to save people, but overwhelmingly, the Nazis were incredibly violent, vile individuals. So the last stage of the Holocaust, which we all probably know very well, was the final solution. This is when they started mass killings. They were losing ground in the war, and so they really ramped up the deaths that they were causing. They started to round people up and kill them in large amounts. They'd take them out to the forest and shoot them. 1.8 million Polish individuals were murdered by Germans during World War II. They would destroy Polish villages. This is the country that they really were infiltrating at the time. But the most infamous is the death camps: Auschwitz, Birkenau, Buchenwald, I think, is another. There's a number of them, but they basically had what looked like showers. They were big concrete buildings inside, usually no windows, and they would tell them to get undressed. They'd tell them that they were going in for a shower, and they would use what was called Zyklon B, and that is a pesticide that was used to kill lice and other bugs. But they basically used diatomaceous earth, which is a type of soil, to absorb into little pellets. And once they had herded all of the people, they could fit thousands in these rooms at the same time. They would drop the pellets into the gas chamber, essentially. And once it hit air, it converted into prussic acid or hydrogen cyanide, and it suffocated. It basically, what it does is it prevents your cells from intaking oxygen, and it was excruciating. They all there was one person that survived miraculously, but it would take 6 to 8 minutes, and once they had all died, they would take them back out, or they'd burn their bodies, and then I believe, I don't remember if this was before or after, but they were told to the people that were processing those bodies, removed any gold fillings, that way they could melt it down for money, and they would burn their bodies. They did this to hundreds of thousands. I believe they killed over 1 million people with this method. Let's see. I think it was like 1.2 million. 2.3. Estimates indicate between 2.3 and 3 million Jews were killed in gas chambers. So basically half of those killed by the Nazis were killed in the gas chambers. And this took place in the final couple years, as Europe and the Soviets narrowed in on Germany. This is, I don't know if you've seen Boy in the Striped Pajamas. Very heartrending movie. I've seen that one. That is what happened to him. If you wanted to understand the process and what happened, that is a movie that does show that. Anne Frank, one of the most famous victims of the Holocaust, she died in a concentration camp. I believe she was sick. And the woman that I told you about that survived being in the gas chamber, she actually tended to Anne Frank as she was passing away. She saw her and was like bunkmates with her. There's another book that I've read called I Will Plant You a Lilac Tree, and that one was written by a woman who survived the Holocaust, and she talks about living in the concentration camps, and what it was like to, like, her home got raided, she got taken, her family was killed, and she ended up marrying he was a Polish soldier, I believe, and he helped her. I don't remember if he helped her escape or if he just helped her survive. But she ended up marrying him, and that one was a very interesting book as well. True story. There's a lot of literature out there talked by survivors, talking about what the experience was like, and how they survived. And I do suggest, if you can handle it, reading some of these books, learning about these books. Schindler's List, obviously, is a very, very famous book about the Holocaust. That one was about Oskar Schindler. He was a German industrialist where he saved more than 1,000 Jewish individuals by tricking the, like, if I remember correctly, he employed a Jewish workforce to kind of pluck them out of that situation and try to save them. There's a lot of amazing stories of people stepping in and doing what they can to save people, hiding them, sending them out, faking paperwork to help keep them safe from harm. I highly suggest looking into these stories, because it's one thing reading the history from a factual standpoint. It's another thing to hear about it from people that actually went through it, because you can see the numbers, you can know the death count, you can know the details, but to viscerally see it, smell it, live it through someone else's words, it's something you never forget. I saw Boy in the Striped Pajamas when I was in 8th grade, and that movie has sat with me for the rest of my life. Like, I can never unhear the ending scene where his mother finds his clothes on the other side of the fence. So basically what Boy in the Striped Pajamas was there's a German family that lives near a concentration camp, a death camp, actually. And their 8-year-old son ends up befriending one of the Jewish boys that's in that camp. And so he goes to visit him on the other side of the fence. They play games, they hang out. And then one day the little boy's father's missing. And so he wants to try and find him. And so the German little boy is like, I will come in and I'll help you find him. And he comes in at the time that they are exterminating the camp. So he ends up being ushered with the rest of the Jewish and prisoners, basically, into the gas chamber. And the ending scene is showing the empty gas chamber and then the mother finding his clothes on the outside of the fence. And then she, like, screams his name. And that scene has stuck with me for my whole life. I watched that movie 20 years ago, maybe, at this point. So, yeah. History is incredibly important to learn. Even though it's, honestly, it can be excruciating to know what happened to so many people It's important to understand what has come before us because history can repeat itself. History will repeat itself. Human psychology does not change very much, and strife does things to people and how they think, how they behave. And we can't let ourselves forget the atrocities that people have been exposed to in the past. Hitler shot himself in 1945. He committed suicide. They didn't get a chance to punish him properly. He took the easy way out. And he took a lot of a lot of the Nazis did end up standing trial, but we didn't get a chance to fully understand what made him the way he was. We know it from speculation from his writing and stuff like that, but obviously we never got a chance to actually understand why he did what he did. We can, as I said, we can speculate based on his writings and stuff like that, but it's honestly criminal to forget about people like that and what they have done to others, because he was a monster, but he was also a human. And as I said, human psychology can be twisted very easily by trauma. And we have to understand what causes this type of person to develop so we don't allow it to happen to ourselves. That is why dystopian books on the Holocaust, books on the Rwanda genocide, books on other honestly horrible things to read about are important for us to at least understand, because it can prevent us from getting there in the future. As I said, right now in America, we're starting to see hints at what Germans experienced in the beginning in the 1930s. We are starting to see reporters being silenced. We are starting to see people harassed and murdered in the street just because of how they look, how they act, because they're agitators. We have been seeing people sent to concentration camps. We have been seeing people sent out of this country and disappeared. We have been seeing groups of people openly villainized and hated for how they are and who they are and how they look and how they behave. We are in a time of history where understanding what happened in the past applies to us right now. And we cannot let ourselves forget the progression of history as it happened to others, because it could very well be happening to us right now. Granted, it's definitely not at the scale and the severity that it was back then. But if you talk to somebody in 1935 in Germany, they might have said the same thing. Oh, well, it's not that bad. Oh, well, it won't get that bad. It can't happen to us. And that's why we need to know, we need to understand the patterns of history, because we can better predict what could be coming for us and what we can do about it. At this point in America, we have to be engaged voters. We have to make sure that people that are like they are now don't have the opportunity to keep doing the damage on our country that they're having on us right now. It's important not to be disengaged, which is something I've noticed. Even my mom, I try and talk to her about politics and what's happening, and she says stuff like, well, I'm too old for this. I don't really it's too much for me. I just don't want to think about it. And this is the type of stuff that people who take over power want. They want people to be disengaged. They want people to not be paying attention. They want it to be an easy takeover. And we can't allow that to happen. For people that are targeted groups, I highly suggest at least getting your ducks in a row, that if you have to leave, you can. That was something that a lot of Jewish individuals dealt with back then, where they didn't have the ability to leave in time. They wanted to, but they couldn't, and they closed the borders. They couldn't leave. If you are less in less danger, I wouldn't say nobody's in danger. Like if you're white, you're fine, because we've clearly seen in Minnesota, Minneapolis, just because you're white doesn't mean you're safe. But stand up for your neighbors. I know it's dangerous because of how violent ICE has become, how openly hateful they are. But we have to continue being peaceful protesters, because they want us to be violent. This is exactly what Hitler did, where as soon as they became violent, he used that to justify total control and total banishment of protests and stuff like that. And he labeled people as agitators, just as our own government has been doing. We're in a very tricky situation right now, where we are getting to the point where it does demand more from us, but we have to be very calculated with it, because we cannot give them the excuse to declare martial law in this country, to determine that we need the military to control us. But it's definitely what they want. That is my opinion. Obviously, a lot of people feel different, but I see a lot of parallels from history in the world we're living in today. So I felt it was really important to address this topic, not only to bring attention to some of the parallels that I'm seeing, but also to just take a moment, take some time to remember the people that have suffered tremendously before us. And we can't forget, it's not just the people that went through the Holocaust that suffered, but their family members, people who lost those they loved to the whole, all the violence. The people who indirectly were affected. There was a lot of good people that were killed, harassed, suffered, had to watch horrific things happening to their neighbors, their family members, their friends. And a lot of people never saw their loved ones ever again and never found out what happened to them. A small number of individuals, which most people probably associate with it, have the numbers tattooed on their arm. And those, there was one quote where she said the smell of the camp hurts more than the scars. And we can't forget the psychological damage that survivors had to undergo. My own great aunt went through the Holocaust, and to her death, she could not talk about what she went through. So there aren't very many survivors alive today, just because of the distance in time. But we owe respect and love and remembrance to all of those people, alive or not, who suffered so terribly at the hands of such a ruthless, horrible organization of people. And keep in mind, those belief systems are not gone. Those still pervade in our country and other countries around the world. And we have to not stand for that hatred. We have to learn how to love people who are different than us, because hatred, if allowed to fester, will turn into something as horrific as what we saw in the 40s, 30s, 40s. So, yeah, I don't want to keep rambling on, but my heart goes out to anybody that was affected and touched by the Holocaust. It's still anybody who's still affected by hatred and the types of behaviors exhibited by people like that. And I just encourage everyone to be kinder to people around you and to learn your history, understand what has happened before you, understand how it can affect you now. Read books, watch movies, read articles, watch documentaries. There's a lot of information available to you. And I very much urge you, as hard as it is to read, understand the details, because that is going to teach you a lot about the future.
By examining his own attitude towards the possibilities of peace, towards the Soviet Union, towards the course of the Cold War.
Art muscle. It was a way of making me feel that they were a part of me.
You see it on the bridge. Wait a minute, I didn't get it. If the government had to change the screw in the bridge, they had to shut it down. They got state troopers out there. They got lanes closed. They got their own strange machines. How did they get up there?